Shalom. Shalom, shalom. We back. We're never moving backwards. Here to put Israel on the atlas. Y'all know the slogan. We say no to vague interpretations and give thorough breakdowns. There ain't one doctrine I can't take down. I had to do that one time for the one time. I can't say one rhyme without a punchline. And with that regard, I go hard in the yard with a library card. Those bars. Let's get it. Let's go. Source Gang, SUC, Source Gang, 7 Gang over everything. You know how we do it, man. We go straight to the source material. We go straight to the books. These other people that's on Facebook, these other entities that claim to be oppositional to our stance and who we are, what we stand for, do not. They are basically the Wendy Williams of the debate world. And all they do is gossip and a lot of chit chat. We go click clack. I've been told them I ain't with all that chit chat. So we're going to get straight to the source material. Today we're going to be dealing with the Black Jews in Africa and the Americas by Tudor Parfitt, part 4. Tomorrow, part 5 will come out. Monday, part 6 will come out. Tuesday, part 7 will come out. Wednesday, part 8 will come out. And Thursday, the last part, part 9, will come out in the entirety. The book in its entirety will be finished. I'm going to wrap this up, and then we're going to finish Edith Bruder's book. I'm going to put all those my notes and highlights into PowerPoint form, and that will be ready. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and knock his book out for the remainder of this week. So you guys get locked and loaded. Shalom, Gideon. Shalom, shalom, brother. Shalom, Plumantis. You know what I'm saying? Hit that like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Y'all did excellent, by the way, last night. We had over 30 live viewers and over 30 likes. So keep the trend going. Keep pushing that like button. Get our name out there. The Source Media, Source Gang, Source Debate League on YouTube and Facebook. All right. Where you're going to get real information. Where you're going to get true scholarship. Okay. So best believe, as long as you follow this channel, I am going to feed you guys with information. All right, Zah Black, we're not dealing with those type of topics today, but shalom to you. Today we're doing a book review, book overview, if you will. Before we even get started and we open up with the introduction, I'm just going to let the people know that I'm well within my right to review information, to review copyrighted information because of the Fair Use Act. Section 107 of the Copyright Act provides the statutory framework for determining whether something is a fair use and identifies certain types of uses, such as criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. We will be using teaching scholarship and we're using this for teaching scholarship and research purposes, and I will be giving commentary, and here and there I will be critiquing. Okay, so we're well within our right to do this. I do not own this. I do not own the book. I mean, I own the book, but I own the rights to it. Tudor Parfitt does, and his publishing does. I'm just here to review it. With no further ado, let's get the video popping, and we're going to open up today with our brother Jeremiah, CEO. Please say the Yah, man. Put some respect on my brother's name, man. Y'all forgot? Y'all must have forgot this brother been spitting flames. So, you know what I'm saying? Let's get it. This song is called Blessings, man. Let's go. Shalom to the family that's in there. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Source Debate League on YouTube. We're going to get it. Let's go.
I've been sent here to do great things, amazing things, beautiful things, positive things, blessing things, healing things, loving things, happy things, for the rebuilding of the new world, the blessing of the world, to build the kingdom here of the Most High God here on earth. Blessings to you, sending you love and positive vibrations around the world. Blessings to you. You're welcome.
Most motivation, start with devastation. You must fall before you rise, they want a demonstration. I'm here to get it all, right before I spend it all. The elderly to come and see the youth, they need to get involved. I want the finer things, in love with shiny things, descended from black royalty, so you can blame my veins. I just call it blessings. I got the right perspective. If I see myself going off, I'm just gonna change direction. I love the brotherhood with all the falls of brotherhood. I ain't gotta say a damn word and know it's understood. Yeah, we make mistakes, but that's what makes us great. Learn how to accept apology without acting fake. I know the pot is hot because you're grudge bearing. A lot of niggas going blind because their sun is staring. They on a mission to dim the light, we call it tail bearing. The law said thou should not covet, but he's still staring. And now I'm mortified with all the sins that multiply. Got your brother crying at the wall like a Mordecai. I'm really horrified. A lot of brothers are feminized. They really start to bug my damn nerves. I use pesticide.
Unlearn, relearn, and apply. Get your blessings from the Most High. Matthew 7:7, seek and you shall find. If you knock, it shall be open wide. Blessings. Hey, get your blessings. Hey, Deuteronomy 28:2-3. All these blessings shall come upon thee. All these blessings shall overtake thee. Get your blessings, hearken unto thee. Blessed shall thou be in the field. Blessed shall thou be in the city.
I push a Range Rover until the rain's over. Dying from an overdose. I hate that he can't stay sober. But it's not the car, it's my spirit, man. Claiming that he show brotherly love, but he never does. There's no greater wealth than your family's health. Gather all the negativity and put it on the shelf. And it's nothing wrong when you have success. A father leave inheritance to his children, that man is blessed.
Unlearn, relearn, and apply. Get your blessings from the Most High. Matthew 7:7, seek and you shall find. If you knock, it shall be open wide. Blessings. Hey, get your blessings. Hey, Deuteronomy 28:2-3. All these blessings shall come upon thee. All these blessings shall overtake thee. Get your blessings, hearken unto thee. Blessed shall thou be in the field. Blessed shall thou be in the city.
Yo. All right, man. Before we get started, before we get into the book, I want to give a couple shout outs to my team. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to the CEO. He in Houston right now doing his thing, shooting a video. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to hold it down for the source all weekend. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to Jeremiah. Please say to Yah, you just listened to one of his tracks. Fire. Fire, by the way. Blessings, man. Him and the sister did a good job on that, man. Dope music. You know what I'm saying? We really blessed over here at the source, to be honest, because we got a lot of dope musicians that we could just open and close the show with, man. So I'm very appreciative to all the brothers, LV, LP, Jeremiah. Shout out to Mighty Hebrew. You know what I'm saying? Hey, if Mighty Hebrew, you watching, man, you want me to play and end the show with your jams or your bangers, man, hit me up from the inbox, man. I'll go ahead and show that love. You know what I'm saying? Any other brother want to, push their music out, okay, the channel is here for you. We will do it. Free promotion over here. You know what I'm saying? Small and humble beginnings. You know what I'm saying? We can get you 200, 300, 400, even sometimes 500 listens. You know what I'm saying? So just hit us up, man. I also want to shout out the Gold Coast Gorillas, the middleweight champion of the source, my brother King Seth, man, holding it down in D-Town, Dallas Town, any even represent H-Town. So, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to my brother, man. Shout out to my brother swinging and banging from the land of Canaan, James, man, hitting these brothers with flames and bringing major pain. You feel me? Shout out to my brother, the Don Dada, the best shotter. That's my brother, Don Bird, Pro Rizzo 1. Always on top of his game. He the top gun. You already know what it is. And we also have our brother Yashar, man. Yashar, tanks on the ground, man. Tanks on the ground. The doctrine is sound. You feel me? You get buried so far on the ground, you won't be found messing with that brother, man. And also shout out to Diamond. She always dropping gems. Always dropping gems. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to our sister Diamond putting in that work too. You know what I'm saying? Salute to everybody. Hey, shalom, Sean Harris, man. My brother Sean Harris is always in the chat, always locked and loaded and ready to go to war with the brothers. And shout out to my brother Blue Mantis. Shout out to my brother Blue Mantis. He on every broadcast. He on every live. You know what I'm saying? Putting in that work and that pain. Supporting the troops, man. He really on the front line with us. He holding the line with us. So, I mean, just shout out to everybody, man. Source up, click. You know what I'm saying? We're going to throw it in your face. Source gang in the place. We're going to throw it in your face. So, you know how we do over here. You know how we rock it, man. We going straight to the source material. We going straight to the books. These other guys is dealing with opinions, rhetoric, and they not really dealing with scholarship. But this scholarship over here explode on contact like hollow tips, man. So we going to get right to it, man. I'm glad if y'all caught what happened last night in the broadcast last night, it was a gem. I dropped a jewel for everybody. The archaeology of Israel, Judah, and Edom. If you haven't seen that, go watch that when you can. Share that link because that is some pertinent information showing the historical reliability of the biblical narrative. Pertinent information. So if you missed that, you don't want to let that pass you by. It's fresh off the press. Completed it last night during the broadcast. But today, we're going into Black Jews in Africa and the Americas. This is chapter 4 by Tudor Parfitt. Amazing book. Amazing book. Gives you pros, cons, the caveats for the argument of these Jews being in Africa and the Americas. All right. So Dr. Parfitt is being very objective with his research, and we respect that. You understand? And what we're also showing is we actually read the book. All of the naysayers don't read the book. They go look for summaries, reviews, and they'll look at that and then make a bold statement or judgment about the book and didn't even open up to page 1. Didn't even read the preface. Didn't even get to chapter 1. We proved that when Chris Harris was on here. Didn't even read page 1 on Peter Mark's book. So let's get it, man. We're gonna outwork these guys with the quality of our work. And that's how we do here. And that's how we rocking, man. Let's go. Let's get started, man. Shout out to the gang, Source Gang. Shout out to everybody that support us. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Source Debate League on YouTube. All right. Told you, man, that scholarship is like hollow tips. They explode on contact. Let's get it. So the Black Jews in Africa and the Americas. Let me make sure that my screen is large as it can be, so you guys can actually see the words. Okay, there we go. Black Jews in Africa and the Americas by Tudor Parfitt. Chapter 4 is entitled Judaic Practices in Superior Stock. During the long process of European exploration and colonization of the world, the essentially binary European South Mediterranean paradigm was the template for perceiving the relationship between European Christians and their neighbors. After 1492, this broad paradigm was obliged to incorporate first a new world in the Americas and subsequently other vast areas in Africa and the Pacific. The attempt to absorb and to understand and radically view others, so discovered, often fell back on the tried and tested typologies that had served Europe for so long. The archetypal South and East Mediterranean others of Europe, the essential religious and racial others, the Moors and the Jews. So the Moors and the Jews were considered others. They weren't considered as the rest of the white, quote unquote, Europeans, whose relationship with Christian Europe had been forged from long centuries of religious dispute and military conflict, where time and again pressed into service in radically different circumstances. So again, we have this history of these Moors and these Jews, and we know the Moors the Moorish armies were described as having faces as black as coal. The Moors and the Saracens are the same. If you look up depictions of the Saracens were dark-skinned individuals. Now, we're not judging people based off phenotypes because we know different quote-unquote races have a range and plethora of phenotypes. There's a phenotypic range. Like when you look at the African Americans, all African Americans don't look the same. Everybody with E markers don't look the same. Adolf Hitler has an E marker. Einstein has an E marker, so on and so forth. These people look like white Europeans, but they have African haplogroups. So again, we're not judging solely based on phenotype. I'm just pointing out that historically these people have been attributed what we will call Negroid or dark skin features or African phenotypes. Now back to the reading. The immediate boundary between European Christians and Jews or Moors was endlessly duplicated throughout the world as Israelite and Moorish identities, dressed up now as Hamites, were fabricated or hinted at on the colonial frontier. With the 19th century obsession with race and color, these groups formed part of a global complex of newly constructed racial taxonomies, which grew out of the desire to control and to understand. The identities thus formed in many cases became meaningful to the people, so reconstructed and useful to the colonial powers. A.J. Christopher has observed that missionaries, possibly more than members of other branches of the colonial establishment, aimed at the radical transformation of indigenous society. They therefore sought, whether consciously or unconsciously, the destruction of pre-colonial societies and the replacement by new Christian societies in the image of Europe. Often enough, the image of Europe also includes the image of Europe's minorities in the construction of Israelite, Jewish, or other Middle Eastern identities, as well as the construction of imagined religious cultures to replace those that actually existed, and imagined languages to replace those that actually existed. It could well be argued, as Nietzsche would have argued, and I would agree, that the constructed identities have been life-enhancing myths, but some have perceived a profoundly sinister project in which the act of the construction and failure to recognize the integrity of linguistic and cultural communities perpetrated a fundamental injury. In West Africa, there was a long European discourse that assumed that somewhere in the Western interior, there were Jews or Israelites who had settled in the continent centuries before and influenced the surrounding peoples, and supposed traces of such people were discovered with great regularity. The main motor for such discoveries and conclusions was the notion embedded in the Hamitic hypothesis that some African people had originated in the distant Middle East, bringing Semitic ideas with them, or that Semitic ideas had been brought from the Middle East, Egypt, or Horn of Africa by some other agents in the ancient time. And the latter part is what I agree with, the Semitic ideas coming from the Middle East, Egypt, and the Horn of Africa, because we have a lot of evidence pointing towards that. Like when we brought up the Bantu expansion, the fact that they had bananas, which is a Southwestern Asian fruit, the fact that they had coconuts, also come from Southwest Asia. They understood metallurgy. They skipped from stone all the way to metallurgy. You understand that? That's unheard of, which is a very complex technique. And if you don't have any pyrotechnology, if you're not making glass beads and stuff like that, then it doesn't make any sense that you skip directly to iron metallurgy. So these things point to that, their understanding of hydrology, which we read last night in archaeology, that comes from the Levant, that the Israelites had a great understanding of hydrology, building cisterns, wells, irrigation, and stuff of that nature. All right, so let's keep reading. So that's my reasons behind siding with that latter statement. We don't follow the Hamitic hypothesis. The Hamitic hypothesis is trash, because it's saying that these are actually Caucasian Hamites that came in. We're not saying that. We're saying these are Semites or Shemites. With respect of the Yoruba people, the British explorer Captain Hugh Clapperton. Oh, before I finish, if you watch our review with Cyan Lex versus Ngozi, Ngozi actually admits that the Acadians would be quote unquote African. We're related to them, which would mean the Acadians, which means these African people known as Acadians would be Semites. They would be Semitic. So that's very interesting that Ngozi actually stated that, which killed his argument, by the way. Zion Lex 2-1. Zion Lex 1, rounds 2 and 3 clear. Ngozi, you must be smoking dust if you think you won that debate. 2 and 3 was won clearly. Round 2, you had no presentation. And 3, you kept contradicting yourself. And all you had to do was knock down the erroneous argument that you stated, that was based on phenotype, But anyway, check that video out. That's on the channel as well. We've been working, man. We working over here, man. Now back to the book. With respect to the Yoruba people, The British explorer Captain Hugh Clapperton, 1788 to 1827, cited a work by Sultan Bayo or Sokoto, perhaps influenced by Leo Africanus, which maintained that the Yoruba people were thought to be of Canaanite extraction. Richard Burton, the English explorer, also cited Sultan Bayo's idea and commented on Bayo's explanation of the word Yoruba, which he connected with the name Yarab, son of Katan, called Joktan by the Hebrew analysts, and enumerated by Muslim genealogies amongst the Arab al-Ariba, or pure Arabs. The origins of the Yoruba could thus be traced back to southern Arabia. Nonetheless, Burton had some difficulty accounting for the origin of the sophisticated religious systems of the Yoruba. He concluded that it had to be sought through some later outside influence emanating from perhaps the Romans or Portuguese or from the powerful kingdom of the Jews in Ethiopia. So these are a few hypotheses to explain the Yoruba, one including the Jews of Ethiopia. All right, let's keep reading. Burton had read the great Scottish traveler James Bruce, 730 to 1794, of whom, unlike most, he approved. Bruce's travels to discover the source of the Nile had been the first book to bring the existence of the Beta Israel or Philosophes of Ethiopia to the general notice of the West. Burton may have had the Beta Israel in mind when he wrote the powerful kingdom of the Jews who may have influenced the Yoruba. It is more likely, however, that he was thinking, perhaps subconsciously, of the various references to Jewish kingdoms in Africa, which filled early modern and medieval travel literature, and of which he was certainly aware. Why? Because we have Idrisi's account, we have the Arabic account, we have early Jewish accounts of Jews in Africa, and we have cartography, which is one of the strongest arguments, by the way, for the presence of Jews in Western Africa is cartography, because the Atlas map was drawn by Jews, and it's a very accurate map and depiction of Western Africa. How would we know that? Because we knew the routes, we were accustomed with and familiar with the landscape, letting you know that there was a Jewish presence in ancient West Africa. All right. Burton was not handling, let me read that again, perhaps subconsciously, of the various references to the Jewish kingdoms in Africa, which filled early modern and medieval travel literature, and of which he was certainly aware. Burton was not handing out much in the way of the compliment when he suggested Jewish influence and Yoruba religious practice. Burton was an out-and-out racist as far as Africans were concerned, and therefore he could not allow that Yoruba had sophisticated religious ideas and have to suggest that they came from perhaps the Jews of Ethiopia. But at the same time, he was notorious anti-Semite as far as Jews were concerned, as his infamous book, The Jew, the Gypsy, and Islam, accusing Eastern Jews of murdering Christian children at Passover, shows. What quite he had in mind with respect to the possibility of Jewish influence here is unclear, although elsewhere his description of Yoruba traditions and customs are peppered with biblical ethnographic allusions. In general, Western travelers and missionaries persisted in seeing the signs that the Yoruba were descended from the ancient Hebrews. Dr. Stephen Septimus Farrell, for one, a Scottish missionary who worked among the Yoruba in the 1890s and wrote a doctoral dissertation in part about them, was convinced of their racial affinities with the Jewish people. And outside attempts to prove their connection to Jews or to lost tribes of Israel have continued until the present time and have been accepted by some Yoruba. So even in present time, you have people making these connections. They were doing it back then, and the Yoruba even accepting these connections to being Jews. Attempts to connect the Yoruba with Israelites or other Middle Eastern peoples were replicated with respect to the neighboring Igbo. In the late 18th century, Aluda Equiano celebrated biography, the interesting narrative of the life of Aluda Equiano, or Gustavus Vasa the African, 1789, described analogies between Jewish customs, law, and belief in those of Igbo. Equiano's elegantly couched account of West Africa was the first description published in the West, supposedly by a native of West Africa. Equiano observed the consequences of the observation were to be significant. Such is the imperfect sketch. So it goes into his actual book, right? The biography. It says, such is the imperfect sketch, right here on the bottom left. Such is the imperfect sketch. My memory has furnished me with the manners and customs of the people among whom I first drew my breath. And I cannot forbear suggesting what has long struck me forcibly, namely the strong analogy which even by this sketch, imperfect as it is, appears to prevail in the manners and customs of my countrymen and those of the Jews before they reach the land of promise. So he's making a comparison. He's saying there's a strong analogy between Igbos and Jews. All right. It says, for we had our circumcision, a rule I believe peculiar to that people. We had also our sacrifices and burnt offerings, our washings and purifications. And shout out to the family that checked out the video last night. We talked about the temple practices, the altars. They had bathing sections and temples where you wash and you purified yourself. So we actually covered that last night on the archaeology of Israel, Judah, and Edom. So check that out in your free time. You might want to catch up on that. But anyway, he said, we had also our sacrifice and burnt offerings, our washings and purifications on the same occasions as they had. As to the difference of color between Igbo and Igbo Africans and modern Jews, I should not presume to account for, because he didn't understand phenotypic range. Because back then, race was your color, your skin color, and your geographical location. That's what race was. You understand? And that's how it was understood, and that's how it was being taught. But that's erroneous, because your father and mother 5 generations ago could look completely different than you. Because when you reproduce, the sperm and the egg meet and create that gamete, your cells are being shuffled, right, and converted, so you can create new phenotypes or a mixture of phenotypes, so on and so forth, right? It just depends how it expresses. But that's for another topic. Check out my video on the channel, Phenotypes Does Not Matter, and I cover that more in detail. All right, so back to this. So he was pretty much in his book comparing the customs of his native people, the Igbos, to the Jews, and he said it was a strong analogy. It says Equiano's book fully merited its sensational reception and went into a number of editions. His text, however, is famously problematic. There are simple reasons to be cautious about those parts of the book that purport to be a first-hand account of its early life in the Igbo village, given the grave doubts recent scholarship has cast upon both the date and the place of his birth. So again, Garfield brought some of these arguments out. And again, this shows that Tudor Parfitt is being objective with his research. He gives you pros, he gives you cons, he gives you both sides of the story. All right, so reading on, says, nonetheless, there's a general agreement that some of what he wrote about the ethnography of the Igbos appears authentic. Clearly, the main point in this passage is the comparison between Igbo manners and customs and those of the Jews. The comparison itself obviously does not come from his childhood memory, nor does he say it does. The passage conveys the kind of general impressions Equiano might easily have gleaned throughout his life from Igbos he met in America. So even if you say, okay, that's not his childhood that he's remembering this from, you can easily make the argument, okay, cool. He gleaned that from the Igbos, these slaves that he met in America, having these Jewish-like customs. This is why I tell people, y'all ain't read this book. All you people that talk against this man's work and say, well, this work is to kill and destroy all Hebrew Israelites, you have not read this book. It's impossible. It clearly gives credence to that argument. Say it again. The passage conveys the kind of general impressions Equiano might easily have gleaned throughout his life from Igbos he met in America, or more probably from the general presumptions embedded in Western attitudes and texts, such as John Ogilvy's, that there were indeed Jews and Jewish or Israelite customs in West Africa. Equiano had no immediate way of explaining the difference in color between Western Jews and Igbo, and he just lets the subject hang. But the reader is surely left with the impression that Igbo may well be of the same origin as the Jews. At first sight, the perspective of an Igbo from West Africa would not seem to be a form of a chapter devoted to the colonial discourse. But in a sense, Equiano's observation formed part of a colonial discourse. Colonial discourse, given the widespread nature of the colonial theories maintaining that there were Israelite lost tribes in every spot on the globe, from the Americas to the islands of the Pacific. The London-based Equiano would have been hard-pressed not to be aware of them. It is possible that he made the comparison of the Jews in order to give aided credibility to his work by invoking the conventional wisdom of his time, namely that there was Jews in West Africa, and to give the impression that Black Africans were civilized and humane and had a culture that, like British culture and European culture in general, had been influenced by Judaic ideals. His book was designed more than anything as a polemic against the iniquities of the enslavement of Black people, and it was no doubt desirable to portray Africans as undeserving of this fate, and then as a civilized a light as possible, which meant as close to the British as possible. So he gives his hypothesis and reason why. But even if you take this reasoning, a lot of people are saying, like Swab Ball said, what has the Israelite ideology done for our people? If you want to take this into consideration, it helped push for the abolition of Africans and being freed from slavery. That's what it helped do. In this case, in this scenario, if you want to use this hypothesis that Tudor Parfitt's pushing and promulgating in his book, then yeah, you can see it helped us fight against identity issues. It helped us fight against some of the harshest racist periods in America. You understand? It helped us fight against those things. So anybody saying what has the Israelite ideology has done for our people has not studied. They're unlearned. Let's keep reading. After 1786, Equiano spent much of his time in England, where at the time there was a sense that the Jews were at very least honorary Britons. Moreover, the national characters of the Jews and the English, including their religious character, was taken to be somewhat similar. According to some famous contemporaries of Equiano, British Protestants themselves were descended from the lost tribe of Israel. One of the most important proponents of this new racialized religious ideology was Richard Brothers, 1757 to 1824. Brothers had a vision in which it was revealed that he was none other than the Prince of the Hebrews, and as such the nephew of the Almighty. I'm sorry. Let me stop reading, man. If y'all watch the video of our interaction with Jehovah Mitchell, this echoes this a little bit. And very interesting to say the least. Back to the reading. Arrested for treasonable practices in 1795, he proclaimed that the government of the Jewish nation will, under the Lord God, be committed to me. Brothers were brought before the Privy Council in the March of that year, thrown into an asylum for the insane, in which he was incarcerated for more than a decade. Brothers was convinced initially that the second coming would be in 1795, when he would be revealed as the Prince of the Hebrews and would lead the Jews back to Palestine, along with the invisible Hebrews, the descendants of the lost tribes, many who lived in England and other Protestant parts of Northern Europe. Over the following century, Anglo-Israelism would grow into a major factor in the creation of racialized religions on both sides of the Atlantic. The end of the 18th century, however, Anglo-Israelism was in its infancy. Nonetheless, connection between the British and the lost tribes of Israel formed part of the currency of the day. Thus, by invoking a blood connection between the Igbos and the Jews, Equiano was also quite probably postulating a blood connection between the Igbos and the British, which was likely to help in this battle against slavery. Because again, Equiano was an abolition. He was pro-abolition. Within a few decades, this idea was fully internalized by at least one Igbo. And within little more than a half century, the conviction that the Jews of Jewish customs were to be found in the Igbo areas of West Africa was widespread outside Africa. Even though before the 1840s, no European had set foot on Igbo-speaking territory. That's huge, because the information that Equiano was providing was that more valuable because of what was just stated. It says no European had set foot on the Igbo-speaking territory at that time, before the 1840s. It says a striking illustration of this came in 1841, 1842, when there was an official British expedition up the Niger, the aim of which was to spread Christianity, establish commerce, and conclude anti-slavery treaties with the chiefs along its banks. William Simpson, who was part of the expedition, explained that he had been asked to take with him 2 letters written by London rabbis, both of them bilingual Hebrew and English format, which he was to hand to the spiritual leaders of any Jewish communities the expedition might encounter along the banks of the Niger. That 2 busy rabbis should take the time to compose letters to lost Jewish groups in the African interior is proof enough that the discourse surrounding Jews in Africa was taken very seriously, even by experts on Jews. The Portuguese rabbi at London, probably David Aron de Sola, 1796 to 1860, wrote to his putative African co-religionists, "Peace to our brethren, the children of Israel, in all places of their habitations." So this is a very tidbit of information. This is how serious these people took it. Like, these rabbis were actually writing letters to communicate with these putative African tribes that may or may not be Jewish, right? Or be of the Jews. Because of this information was being spread and it was buzzing throughout Europe. It says, "I, the servant of the Lord, named David the Small, is he who writes this in order to inquire after your welfare and the number of the souls, and wishes also to know your occupation and what books are to be found amongst you after the conclusion of the Talmud, and to what customs you are adhered. All this let me know well and clear, explained through this man who goes towards you to explore and search the places of your habitation." Other members of the expedition, including James Frederick Scone, who was much taken by the supreme being in the apparently monotheistic religious system of the Yoruba, and Samuel Ajayi Crowther, 1809-1891, another pro-abolitionist, a former slave freed by the British who went on to be the first African Anglican bishop and would eventually translate the Bible into Yoruba. Other members of the expedition also made reference to seemingly Jewish customs. Circumcision was one that were found among the peoples of the Niger. The expedition up to the Niger was a failure. It did not succeed in its primary task, and most of its members died of fever. The expedition also failed to discover any hitherto unknown Jewish communities, although Jewish influence were found aplenty. The Jewishness of the Igbo received further significant support with the publication in 1921 of a book by the Welsh ethnographer and Church Missionary Society, CMS, missionary Dr. George T. Baston, who first arrived in the Igbo territory in 1900. After the ill-fated Niger expedition, little further information had been gleaned before Baston's arrival. Now, the thing about Baston, I was first introduced to G.T. Baston's work by an Igbo. If anybody knows my background, I was once a part of an organization known as IUIC. I was a part of the Dallas camp. I actually started that Dallas camp, by the way. And there was an Igbo brother that joined the church, joined the camp in that time. And his name was Emmanuel. You know what I'm saying? Emmanuel, he was going to school to be a doctor. I never forget that, brother. And he came to me with this packet. And he said, "Listen, I've been knowing about Igbo Jewish connection. And this is how I know it." And he showed me a packet of G.T. Baston's work. And I was just reading. I took the packet home, read through it. Oh, okay, that's very interesting. So my first time knowing about G.T. Baston is actually through an actual Igbo. So that's very interesting. But, just a tidbit of information I thought I'd share with you guys. Let's keep reading. We're right here, lower right side of the page. Baston undertook a serious study of the Igbo and was generally recognized as the leading expert on this subject. Among the Igbos of Nigeria, an account of the curious and interesting habits, customs, and beliefs of a little-known African people by one who has for many years lived amongst them on close and intimate terms, claimed that the Igbo customs bore the direct imprint of ancient Israelite law, while the Igbo language had elements in common with Hebrew. There are, he noted, with a casualness and lack of precision that speak volumes, as if nothing that followed was in any way controversial or needed to be proved. Certain customs which rather points to Levitic influence at a more or less remote period. This is suggested in the underlying ideas concerning sacrifice and in the practice of circumcision. The language also bears several interesting parallels with Hebrew idioms. So those are quotations from his book. It says, "From Equiano's time to our own day, the discourse placing Jews in West Africa or constructing West Africans as an Israelite racial entity has continued to develop and expand with some remarkable consequences. Throughout the 19th century, Jewish or Israelite traits and languages were imagined into existence with great regularity, and the biological origins and racial stereotypes of many West African peoples were stated to be Jewish or Israelite. To me, I want to make this point real quick. Notice that what these people are hypothesizing about these people on is not that a Jewish rabbi came by and converted them. Majority of this is saying that these people just originate from Jews. They're not saying anything about them going through religious conversion and accepting the halakha. They're not saying that. All right. It says sometimes indigenous origins myths were also invoked to assert Semitic origins. These may have contained some element of historical memory of actual Jewish presence in West Africa. These may have contained some element of historical memory of actual Jewish presence in West Africa. This is why we preface and we warn y'all, when he says myth, it doesn't mean pure fiction. Just like in his student, Edith Bruder's book, she tells you when I use the word myth, I don't mean pure fiction, because these things contain historical realities. And he is open to that idea because in his book, he says these may have contained some element of historical memory of actual Jewish presence in West Africa. And then he gives the caveat, or more likely may have come about as a result of Muslim influence. But he's open to the idea that these retain the historical memory of an actual Jewish presence in West Africa. It's in the book. Take a look. It's in a book, Reading Rainbow. It says, thus the Soninke people who are scattered throughout and beyond the areas of the ancient Ghana Empire allegedly had traditions that claimed an extraneous origin for themselves, which invoked the memory of Dinga, their ancestor who was believed to be of the Middle Eastern extraction and have to come from Jerusalem or perhaps from the Yemen. Dinga's own direct ancestors were variously believed to be the biblical Job, King Solomon, or King David. One French colonial official, Maurice Delafosse, basing his views in part upon these tribal traditions, concluded that the Ghana Empire had been founded by a nomadic group from northern Africa of Middle Eastern origin and constructed a theory around a Judeo-Syrian racial origin of the Soninke. Now, real quick, before we continue reading on, if you the Soninke, the KE denotes people of Sonin. Sonin is Aswan in Egypt. If you look up Aswan, Aswan was known as what's the word I'm looking for? Repository, or where a lot of the Asiatic refugees were living. Aswan is right next to Elephantine. If you know about Elephantine, Elephantine is famous for what? The Elephantine papyri, where you had Jews writing letters to known prominent figures in the land of Israel, right? In the 5th century BCE. So we do know Jews were in that region. And you got people calling themselves the Soninke, the children of Sonin, which is Aswan, claiming a Judeo-Syrian racial background. It just makes sense. It lines up historically. All right. So let's keep reading. In the case of the scattered Fula people of West and Central Africa, who were particularly liked by Westerners and who were considered to be the false Negroes and semi-Hamites and of superior stock of the to authentic blacks, all sorts of theories were advanced by early observers to elevate them from the common herd. Were they a lost tribe of Israel, or were they rather descended from the Egyptians, or had a Roman legion gone astray in the Sahara? Edmund Dean Morel, 1873 to 1924, the British journalist, socialist, and author, wrote ecstatically of the remarkable knowledge of the Fula had of Hebrew legends and of their even more wonderful racial characteristics. The straight nose, straight haired, relatively thin lip, wiry copper or brown complexion, pale gold, as one writer puts it, Fulani male with his well-developed cranium and refined extremities, and the Fulani women with her clear skin, her rounded breasts. Negro women were thought to have long dropping breasts, large eyes, antimony-dyed eyebrows, gracefulness of movement, beauty of form are Asiatics. they are lineal descendants of the Hyksos, having migrated westward with the overthrow of the shepherd conquerors. Their customs bear record of their progenitors having been influenced both by the cult of ancient Egypt and by the Israelites whose presence in the Nile Delta was contemporaneous with Hyksos rule. I am not aware that the Eastern theory of Fulani origin has been hitherto worked out with any attempt at consecutiveness or endeavor made to amalgamate and give in connected form. However, imperfectly, the chief factors for further study, which may be usefully followed up by someone more competent than the author, and what is to be the policy of Great Britain, of France, and of Germany towards this wonderful race. Surely it should be dictated in the first place by a desire to preserve, with their faults and what race is devoid of faults. The Fulani have admirable qualities which can fit them to be worthy and reliable co-builders in the assistance in the task which the powers have undertaken in Western Africa. Their virility has hitherto been equal to all the calls upon it. They retain the strong pride of race. They possess in the highest degree the attributes of rulers. End quote. French colonial officials argued that the ruling dynasty in Ghana was also of Jewish origin and that the burial mounds found in the Niger Delta were built by Jews. In 1939, a French official observed that there was an ethnic group also in the Niger Delta, which was rather light-skinned and which ruled over black people with the assistance of Uhuso, the name of a supernatural a creature of phenomenal strength, which he constructed to mean Jew. This construction is of particular interest in a view of the contemporary construction in Germany and elsewhere of Jews as an omnipotent and baleful organism feeding off the heart of Europe. I'm sorry, I had to laugh at that. That was silly. Reading on. Slightly to the east of Ghana and Dahomey, Pierre Bertrand Boucher, a 19th century French Catholic missionary, also observed customs such as circumcision rituals and female menstrual seclusion, which he viewed as being Jewish origin termed Judaic practices. Because we all know in the book of Leviticus, it tells you that a woman that's on her menstrual, on her period, she cannot be in close quarters with anybody. Anything she touches is unclean. So she had a separate living quarter that she would go live in while she's on her flower or her menstrual. And he was noticing this amongst the homie and the people of Ghana. Another such group was the Ashanti and Akan people who lived principally in Ghana and the Ivory Coast. In 1817, the resourceful and scholarly British traveler Thomas Edward Boldick, 1791 to 1824, was sent by the African Company of Merchants on a mission to the Royal Ashanti Court at Kumasi, where he succeeded in securing British control over Ashanti coastal regions. He and his companions were the first Europeans to traverse the rainforest and the Ashanti interior, and his adventures were described in the Mission from Cape Coast Castle to Ashanti, which was first published in 1819. For Boldick, the task of trying to construct a racial category to which to place the Ashanti was one based on looking for similarities between Europeans and the Ashanti. The construction depended on more on sameness than difference. He was looking for similarities between the Ashanti and people like himself and found them. He commented, for instance, on the Grecian features and brilliant eyes of Ashanti women set rather obliquely in the head. In his influential essay on the superstitions, customs, and acts common to the ancient Egyptians, Abyssinians, and Ashantis, Paris, 1821. He described the cultural and linguistic connections and commonalities between Ashanti and the Phoenicians, ancient Egyptians, and Ethiopians, and he argued that the Ashanti people derived ultimately from the civilized Ethiopians of Herodotus. Similarly, noting that they were thought to be the most civil and well-bred people in Africa, Frederick Ratzel, 1844 to 1904, the geographer and ethnographer, and the man who coined the term Lebensraum in National Socialist sense, admirably wrote of the Ashanti that they were a dominant race of conquerors and empire builders who had come from elsewhere and with their superior culture taken the land from lesser peoples. His Lebensraum ideas fitted the Ashanti case well because he theorized that superior cultures destroy inferior cultures in the battle of living space. Now, let me stop and add my little 2 cents to this. A lot of people say, oh, that's hateful to think that. But if you examine history, that's the case. Especially if you study the Bantu expansion. In the Bantu expansion, you either had to assimilate or get destroyed, man. Assimilation or elimination. And we see that with the Bantu expansion. You had these people with E-markers coming through Africa, sweeping through South Africa and West Africa, displacing the forest, the bush people, the pygmy, the pygmy-twa, the Khoi people, displacing the males and taking the women. Why? Because they had metallurgy. They had iron tools and weapons. They were more powerful than these hunter-gatherer, foraging people that were more primitive and lived a more simple life. That's just what happened. That's history. So we're just telling history here. So actually what they're saying is lining up with history. It's still a hypothesis, but it makes sense. It's plausible. That's the point. All right. So his Lesmer ideas fitted the Ashanti case well because he theorized that superior cultures destroy inferior cultures in battling for a living space. Of the Ashanti, he wrote, they are among the best breeds of Guinea, intelligent, industrious, and courageous. They were thought generally to be formed elsewhere and probably to be a lost tribe of Israel, even though the Ashanti themselves made every effort to record their origin as being from Ashanti proper. The explorer Sir Henry Stanley, 1841 to 1904, while working for the New York Herald, observed a striking similarity between an Ashanti stool and a depiction of one he had seen in Thebes in Egypt. Impressed by the workmanship of the stool, he went on to enthuse about the excellence of the Ashanti sandals at the very repetition of the word once thought revert to the inhabitants of Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor. Anything found in African culture regularly elicited the reaction that it must be from somewhere else, and usual locus was Palestine or the Middle East. The brass plaques known as the Benin bronzes, which were seized by a British force in 1897 in Benin City, challenged Western assumptions about Africa in general, and Benin perceived as the home of human sacrifice and fetish in particular. Various explanations were sought to counter epistemological embarrassment. If the Ashanti were not perhaps racially European, they were not too far removed. Thus, the bronzes were regularly attributed to the lost tribe of Israelites, Egyptians, or the men of Atlantis, while other African artistic traditions were explained away as deriving from the art of ancient Egypt. A detailed and specifically Israelite theory with respect to the racial construction of the Ashanti emerged in a major study published in 1930 by Joseph J. Williams, a Jesuit ethnographer and fellow of the American Geographical Society, who worked for the Catholic Review and was professor of cultural anthropology at the Boston College Graduate School. He never worked in West Africa, but did undertake some research trips to Jamaica and other Caribbean islands in search of traces of West African culture. He claimed, and no one particularly disputed his claims, to have found many traces of Hebrew and the Ashanti language and of Israelite customs and the culture of the Ashanti. He took the name Ashanti to mean the sons of Ashan, T meaning the sons of, and connected Ashan with a city that was one of the cities of the tribe of Judah. He found countless parallels between the religious culture of the Ashanti in the Hebrew Bible, including the use of spirit mediums, the name of which Ashanti and Ashanti recalled the Hebrew term of both. He perceived Hebraic vestiges in Ashanti religious dances, their use of Hebrew word amen at the end of prayers, and their names and marriage customs. There were even specific Ashanti ritual items that reflected, he thought, accoutrements of the high priest at the Temple of Jerusalem, including the misnefet or mitre, and the breastplate complete with the insignia of the lost 12 tribes of Israel. Williams reached the final conclusion that the supreme being not only of the Ashanti and the allied tribes, but most probably of the whole Negro land as well, is not the God of the Christians, which at a comparatively recent date was superimposed on the various tribal beliefs by ministers of the gospel, but the Yahweh of the Hebrews, and that too of the Hebrews of pre-exilic times. So a lot of you guys know about Joseph J. Williams' book, Hebrewisms of West Africa. This is the book that's being referenced right now. Very powerful book. I recommend it. Good read. So that was his conclusion, that these people were actually Hebrews, Israelites, and their God was actually Yahweh. The reviewer of Williams' work in the respected journal of the Royal African Society was hesitant about the purported connection between the Ashanti in Hebrew, as in the pairs, Naomi and Yahweh, and Torah, but was not averse to the overall thesis. The reviewer recognized that the Ashanti inland tribes had many of those Semitic traits which the Ashanti also exhibit, but whether in addition their ruling class, which probably also influenced the Akan stocks, were Jews from Palestine, pre-exilic or post-exile, or Semito-Negro Carthaginians, must perhaps forever remain unknown. In quotation. However, they were clearly something along those racial lines. Williams' proposals gained support from a number of subsequent writers. One such was Eva Merowitz, a doughty supporter of the Hamitic hypothesis. Merowitz started her research in 1943 when she was art supervisor at Akmoda College, the elite private school in the Assyria, Ghana. She was asked by the Burlington magazine to write a series of articles on the Ashanti gold ornaments and went on to do field work among Akan-speaking peoples supported by the Royal Anthropological Institute, the Colonial Research Council, and the University College of Ghana. Her research yielded 4 volumes: The Sacred State of Akan, Akan Traditions and Origins, The Akan of Ghana, Their Ancient Beliefs, and the Divine Kingship in Ghana and Ancient Egypt. 1960. In her 3rd volume, she argued that the Carthaginian deities Tanit and Baal Haman could be equated with the Akan, Naomi, and Nyan Copeland in just about every detail. Throughout this book of work were 2 assumptions: that the Akan have declined over time from where they once were, and that they originated from ancient cultures of Egypt and the Near East, and particularly from the Libyo-Phoenician cultures of pre-Arab North Africa. The assumptions were made of a wide variety of peoples throughout the 9th century and 20th centuries in most other regions of Africa and the African diaspora. That's the chapter. So we got a lot of tidbits of information from this chapter, going over some of the myths, some of the stories, the hypotheses that led people to believe that there were Jews in West Africa, some of them even plausibly being connected with a historical memory that actually took place to bear witness to a presence of Jews in West Africa. All right, let me check y'all. Let me check the temperature of the room. Hey, Shalom, man, hit that like button. Hey, Shalom, James. Right. They had the proof. They had the Zebu cattle. The Bantus were bringing in Southwestern Asian cattle, like the Zebu cattle, the humpback cattle. They was bringing in livestock like the chickens. So we can see that these people were bringing in Southwest Asian technology, pyrotechnology in animals, livestock, cereals, and grains. Okay, now I have everything I need to hypothesize that these people were Southwest Asian in origin. And we already showed you the paper from Morjani showing that all 8 distinct Jewish groups, have sub-Saharan African DNA. And the DNA that he used to detect that is the Yoruba. That's the Yoruba component to connect these 8 distinct Jewish groups to sub-Saharan Africans. They all have 3 to 5% sub-Saharan African DNA, and once they date the microsatellites and the STRs, it goes back to the Israelite period that we read about last night, the Iron 2A period. The Iron 2A period, before the 8th century BCE. That's when you expect Israelites to arise and start to dominate the Levant. That period. So again, we have material culture, we have genetics, we have anthropology, archaeology, we have everything we need to make an argument and build our model for us being Israelites. You understand? So a lot what was being discussed, what was being discussed during this time can be proven. You understand? All right, the displacement of Paleo-Africans, such as the Bushmen, such as the Pygmies, forest people, the Khoikhoi, that was done by foreign invaders, which we call the Bantus. They came and displaced these people. And I will debate anybody on that. And you're going to get washed because you don't read, you don't study. All right, so we completed chapter 4 of Tudor Parfitt's book. Check out the video that I did last night on the archaeology of Judah, Israel, and Edom. Very good and insightful. And it's going to give you a lot of tidbits of information that are pertinent to our arguments. You understand? A lot of people are combating the historicity of the biblical narrative, but we have a lot of archaeology to back up the historical narrative. One point, the relief of Lachish shows that there was an invasion, and it shows Jewish customs as well. The depiction of Jehu, right? The picture of Jehu has fringes on the border of his garment, just like the Bible says we kept that custom. So we have archaeological attestation to the biblical narrative. The Assyrians coming into Northern Kingdom and deporting people, that is attested in the archaeological record. So we see that. And again, we brought out today about the Sonike. The Sonike people are the children of Sonin, which are from Aswan. Aswan is right next to Elephantine. And we know that the Elephantine Jews were there. We have their writings. They left a footprint in the historical record. We have documentary evidence. So when you see these Sonike going to West Africa, we can say without a shadow of doubt that it's plausible that they descend from the same Jews that was in those regions. You understand? These are not baseless claims. And that's why Tudor Parfitt said in his book, these things could reflect real historical memories. He's open to that. He's not a cynic. All right? So y'all know how we do at the source, man. We're getting ready to close out. You know what I'm saying? That was chapter 4. Chapter 5 will be releasing on the channel tomorrow. And chapter 5 is the half white and half black. It's entitled Half White and Half Black. Another interesting chapter that we're going to deal with. So chapter 5 will be released tomorrow on the channel. And then chapter 6 will be released Monday. Chapter 7 will be released Tuesday. Chapter 8 will be released Wednesday. And chapter 9 and the epilogue will be released Thursday. That will be the final episode. That will be the final part in the book. Tudor Parfitt's book will be completed, archived, and put in a playlist. So anyone who wants to go throughout the whole book, they can on the Source Debate League on Genesis 49ers. All right. So we're gonna close out, man. Let me see if my brother Mighty Hebrew might have hit me up with some music. I'm not sure. We'll close out with him if he did. Let me check it out, man. Hey, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Share the video. Get the video out there. Get it out there, man. Let's see. Let's see what this joint is.
Good. 2020. The mighty the billion. North Philly stand up. Down here with my Houston crews. You know how we do. Hebrew Israelite sovereign nationalism rising worldwide. Yo, China with Jack to Russia. Your mind's puzzled in destruction, deconstruction. A world becoming committed 300. George Orwell book is spoken, focus on Persia. Destroying Daniel opens, giving vision, peace, image, selling enslaved ships with Israelites, shook to iron, dying daughters of Zion, crying in pits, words, 2836, decrypting hidden feel. God's wisdom, the dead live. Word of feeling. Yasha Allah's now risen from invading nations, ruling in hatred, parading our labor with slaves from the soup. Possessed with Masonic voodoo, overseen by Juju. Yeah, the Jewish man fucking fooled you. We the Hebrews from the tribe of Judah. Rest bin Ami, Rabbi Nu, Adonai Nu. Give shalom to Dr. Shaliach for me. When you read me, degree 720, cipher complete. Exodus 720, incarnate stabs, giving omens, ruling like Joseph, Hyksos over the Hyksos, with a death potion, scoping horror like Horus, Frankenstein, 12 tribes like Boris, we Octagon fight, Chuck Norris, captivity we sell, over tosses, dry bones resurrect from our lost coffins, Lazarus we walk in, adapt, horse and fame, calling Yahweh's name, we claim sovereign reign over middle terrain, stains of black rain, lead on the brain, to 2/3 get wasted by Edom's cavemen, Totarian state, where freedom fighters get placed, for Norman bait, sell me, drowning in crystal lake, like Jason, don't change the station, the truth face it, the earth is shaking as we quaking, cracking pavements, no one's safe from fate, bones break, shaking, get baked, my club of bones, Olympian racists and rapists, against ancient sages walking the way, Abraham, Isaac and Jake, blood in my veins, alien DNA in my piney, from 7 root races I bore the savior, from the sacred seed of David, being raised in the last days, with Jacob behind the western gate, of Masonic reigns to Satan, the Gentiles world is fading, as we awake from danger, Kwam Yasha Allah, 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 yo, check it. Kwam Yasha Allah, 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 yo, check it. My mental plane, rain celestial terrain, power range, glass stainless, ascending master in the rain. Return, rearrange your enemy, the matrix, no escaping, ship shaping, incarnated awakening. Lumerian Texas label sacred to those star glazing for the fate of Jacob. Climb ladder shattering to the 12th planet. Clouds magnetic, Yah's eye, vision lightning striking. Eagles Vikings with force of Dami, Lucas Malama, controlling karma. My throne is Mars, master with law as a rule. Savior, my behavior permeates dark matter in 4 chambers, earthbound and physical. Myself, I'm a stranger, really an angel. Trapped prolonged from anger, stargating. Use 6-point triangles to astral project my temple to elements of wise intelligence to a land of never end. Losing 5 senses to senselessness, vision and vision's appearance of Sirius, aligning every pyramid the minds of builders. Y'all, money, 2020, the mighty Hebrew. Shalom.
Yo, man, hey, Mighty Hebrew said he the Wu-Tang influence of the Hebrew community, man. Shout out to Mighty Hebrew, man. I want to show him some love on the channel. You know what I'm saying? We'll be back tomorrow, going live with chapter 5. So y'all tune in. You know how we doing. We going hard in the yard with a library card. We read over here, man. We dissing the ops, man. You know how we doing. Source Gang, SUC. Let's get it. Gang.